Thanks for coming on, Katie. How are you
Thank you for
today?
having me.
Yeah.
I'm good, thank you.
Tell us your story. Tell us your marathon swim story.
That's a big question. My swim story really started when I was at College State in grad school in 2008. I saw a flyer in one of the restrooms for a 10K swim, the Horsetooth 10K. And I had been kind of retired from swimming and retired from triathlon and knew I didn't want to run again ever in my life. So that seemed like something that, would have been a good adventure. And so eventually I signed up and I met Joe Bakel, who organizes the Horsetooth 10K and who at the time was organizing a small group of crazy people that went swimming in this dark, cold mountain lake every morning at 4 to train for the English Channel. And so eventually, I just kind of became part of that training group. And all of a sudden the English Channel became a big dream. And that's kind of how it all started.
Wow, I'm curious. I grew up outside of Denver, and so I'm just curious, what mountain lake were you at around Colorado?
We were in Lake Loveland, which I'm not sure how officially we're supposed to be
Oh,
there.
okay. I didn't. There's results. I'll edit that out. Well, I probably won't, but okay. So secret mountain lake. Okay. Awesome. So you were coming out of triathlon and you just thought it would be a new adventure. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I swam all through middle school and high school, and then around age 16, 17, got into triathlon and did some Ironman stuff for a few years, and probably did some of those really long things a little bit too young. And so I burned out pretty early on because I was doing Hawaii in my early 20s, like age group 18, 24. And after that, I was pretty burned out, and running was never really my thing anyway.
Yeah, I tried running for a while. It didn't stick for me either.
No, gravity hurts.
It does. I know. It's way better in the water. I agree. Tell me, why do you keep swimming marathons? Because I know you've done more than just that 10K.
Yeah, so eventually the English Channel became a goal, and I heard about the Triple Crown of open water swimming, and so that the strategy was going to be to do the swim around Manhattan Island and then Catalina, and then work my way up to the English Channel. So I did that between 2010 and 2012, and then I was kind of sort of going to retire, but then in 2013 I did like a little bit of everything. I relapsed and did an Ironman distance, and it was terrible. And so I decided I need to find some more swimming goals, and I ended up signing up for Molokai. So swim the Kaiwi Channel, which was super fun and finally a little bit warmer because cold is not really my thing. But over the years, just kind of pretty much tackled all of the major ones in the US. At some point, I was thinking about the Ocean 7. I tried the North Channel from Ireland to Scotland in 2014. Didn't make it. I made it for about 8 hours, and then I got really bad hypothermia. It's just probably not something that I can ever do because I gained as much weight as I could and did all the ice baths and had an endless pool that I kept really cold, but it still wasn't going to happen. So now I'm kind of really sold on the idea, if I'm swimming somewhere really far, there's better going to be a palm tree involved and, some sort of a warm beach. And so hence I'm now doing some of the more tropical things.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us about your most recent adventure.
Yeah. Well, you probably remember last year when Cameron and Bellamy swam from Barbados to St. Lucia, and I was just glued to my computer screen. Last fall was just crazy between Sarah and her. I cannot even comprehend what happened there, but between her 4 times English Channel and then Cameron doing that monster swim, I was just kind of sitting at home. I'm like, I wonder if I could just swim 24 hours. I mean, let alone, those crazy distances. But
Right.
the
Yeah.
24 hours were always kind of like in my mind, like I just wonder what it would be like. And so I ended up contacting Sue Dyson from St. Lucia Channel Swimming. And originally I was inquiring about a swim around the island. And so she's like, well, that's 77 miles. I'm like, okay, that's pretty far. So, the idea was the longest I'd ever done was Kaiwi with 26 miles. And so finding something in between to see how I would hold up if I swim for 24 hours in one piece. And so she came up with the idea of trying the double St. Lucia channel, so from St. Lucia to Martinique and back. And so that's what we attempted.
Very cool. What was your best memory from that journey?
Oh, it was such a great adventure. It's still so fresh too, because I've only been home for about a week now, and I'm still really missing the island. It was just amazing. Everything. I mean, just from like heading out at night, like just the stars in the sky were unlike anything I'd ever seen. It almost looked like it was fake. There was just such an amazing light that night. And I actually, you know, I had the little blinking light on the back of my swim cap, but every once in a while I just had to flip over and swim some backstrokes. I'm like, I'm missing this view and I can't. And I guess they got really worried because they couldn't see me here and there for a little bit when I did that. But that was just amazing. The swim from St Lucia to Martinique went pretty fast and relatively easy. I mean, it was warm, it was beautiful. The sun is pretty intense, so we just kind of put all kinds of, you know, diaper cream on and zinc stuff. And when we got to Martinique, it was really neat. About maybe an hour out from shore, I just heard somebody screaming my name, and I looked up, and there was this little boat with Christophe Malot, who's a 12-year-old, well, now he's 13, boy from Martinique. And a couple of days prior to my swim, he had swum from St. Lucia to Martinique at age 12, a day before his birthday.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, there's this little boy sitting on the boat, and he's just beaming and screaming. And they actually followed me all the way to the shore, and we were able to meet when I was touching the land there, and we took some pictures. And he's about 4 feet tall, and he has a 1 foot wide smile, and he was just so excited, bouncing up and down. That was just great. And he speaks French, and I speak German and English, so we didn't really, really talk, but we totally got it. We're just like beaming and smiling and just happy to be there. That was a pretty neat moment.
That's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. So did you hit your 24-hour goal?
Yeah. So on the way back, I was thinking about this actually today. So what happened is we, on the way back, got way out west somewhere in the middle of the night. Of course, I'm completely unaware of this. I'm just kind of swimming.
Yeah.
And I was really, because it took me about 12 and a half hours to get to Martinique. And so in my mind, you're kind of calculating like, okay, probably 15, 16 hours for the way back. I'll probably lose a little bit. But, the night came, and I was really dead set on the idea, if we just make it through the night, we're going to be at shore. That's got to be it. And then the sunrise came, and we're still not there. And there were several stops where I'm like, how far out are we? And the answer I kept getting, which you probably shouldn't even ask the question, but the answer I kept getting was 5 miles. And at that point, I had a lot of tongue swelling going on, which I'm thinking is partially from the salt water. I also got stung quite a bit, but by minor jellies. So I'm not sure how much of that was allergic, but I had some pretty big difficulty swallowing. So that was getting a little bit scary as I'm trying to talk to my crew and I can't really say anything. And so at some point at 6:30 in the morning, we made that decision. I talked to Suze a little bit longer, and she's like, well, you're about 5-6 miles out now. So it was actually pushing me further away. And my son was on the boat too. He's 15. He had a really good time, but you can kind of tell like the crew gets quiet and everybody's starting to look a little scared as I'm trying to talk and I can't. So we decided to call it, which, initially I was fine, like, because we swam 29 hours and 10 minutes and I covered 41 miles, a lot of it just going in one place. But I was pretty excited to put that distance in at first. And now 2 weeks later, I'm like, we could have, we almost made it. And so it stings a little bit more now, which is interesting. But I think what got me was the expectation. Like I was dead set, like this is going to take no longer than 30 hours. And I was dead set, once we make it through the night, we're going to be there. And when we weren't, I think I mentally kind of started falling apart a little bit too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tough. Yeah. Those expectations, I think that's a gift that some of these marathon swimmers like really have, for just kind of letting it go. And
yeah,
we're still working on it.
Yeah, we're still working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you train over the pandemic and everything? How did you train for such a big swim?
It was chaotic. Originally the swim was supposed to happen in June, and then everything shut down, and my local pool closed sometime in March, and that was a pretty big hit. I mean, I think for all of us, I'm like, what do you mean the pool was closed? And it wasn't warm enough outside to do anything yet. It was still semi-frozen. So I used my pool courts until they eventually broke, and then I was ordering new ones on Amazon that were kind of hard to come by, and did a lot of kickboxing, like those little fitness videos, and I'm not really coordinated, so hit myself in the face quite often trying to figure out how to do all that. But just kind of doing stuff around the house. I even ran a little bit in my despair. And then I think it was around April, May, when it finally got warm enough outside, and I have a pond behind my house, so I was able to swim there, and then the pool opened back up. So gradually kind of got back into things.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot of time in a pond or a pool though.
Yeah, the pond is only about 250 yards long, and I'm the only person who swims there. It belongs to our neighborhood, and it's pretty murky and suspicious looking.
You're very
It
brave.
has good catfish in it, but I'm like, it's water. It counts. I can make this work.
I love that. I love that. I love that part of your book too. I tell us a little bit about your book since I brought it up.
Yeah, so one of those things that you can finally finish when you're dealing with lockdown and pandemics. The book was a project that I kind of had on my mind for some time. I just really enjoy writing, and I had some pretty good adventures along the way. I'm not super fast, and I'm not breaking any crazy records or anything, but just met amazing people over the years and been to so many different spots just traveling with the sport. So felt like maybe somebody's going to get a kick out of reading some of these stories, and so finally got to it and finished it. And talks really not so much only about swimming, more kind of like my life story and how I ended up in all the different places, doing all the different things that I've done over time. So hopefully there's some life lessons in there that are helpful to somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I love how you grouped it up by the adventures. And I don't know, just the way you said it too. Now it's like marathon swimming is so amazing in that regard, that like signing up for this adventure just can take you to this place, and and there's the adventure aspect of it, but then we all learned something from it, and it was beautiful. I'm really excited that you had the courage to put it out there, and commend you. And I hope everybody picks up a copy.
It was kind of scary. Like I didn't really I just wrote it and then went through with it. And then after it published, I realized like this is pretty much my whole life story that everybody can read now. I don't know why it didn't occur to me a little bit sooner, but it definitely feels a little vulnerable here and there.
Yeah. Yep. But what's that saying? There's a Theodore Roosevelt quote about putting yourself in a ring. It's the right thing to do. It's awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
Tell us about the swim you're the most proud of.
The swim that I'm most proud of. It's probably going to be, there's three of them I'm kind of thinking about. The English Channel is just, that's the classic. But the moment I finished, I think I read this about Sarah somewhere, that she immediately thought about wanting to swim back and be back and do more. The moment I finished the English Channel, like I will never, ever be back in Dover. It was great. I'm so glad it's on the list of things that I've gotten done, but with my hatred for cold. So that was a big one that I even made it, I think. Hawaii was actually a really hard one for me for a lot of different reasons, from seasickness to, again, expectations, because I thought it was going to be a shorter swim than it ended up being, and that did me in a little bit. But then this one was probably the best sports performance, I think, from, even though it did not finish, so it kind of has a little bit of a bitter aftertaste. But I feel pretty encouraged that I was able to swim for that long. So I kind of want to push that further now. I don't know how that's going to end, but I'm pretty encouraged that I'm able to swim 29 hours in one piece. For me, that was a pretty big accomplishment.
Yeah. Do you prefer salt or fresh water?
Like the salt water was really nice in St Lucia. It's actually extremely salty. So you can go out and you can float on your back and just tan a little bit if you like. So it really helps with swimming. It really makes your swimming a lot easier, but then the problem becomes just kind of mouth, tongue issues, and just the abrasiveness of the water over the hours. So I don't know how we're going to get that under control. And I think for Cameron, from what I've been hearing, that was a pretty big issue for him too. And so I'm a little worried how we're going to tackle that next time. I think that's probably just kind of what it is if you're in salt water for that long. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the drawbacks, but I still like salt water a little bit better.
Yeah, is that right? Okay. Have you had any, do you have any favorite events, marathon swim events you've participated in?
Probably Search of Memphis up in Vermont. Phil White is just a phenomenal host, and it's just a phenomenal event, and I just loved it up there. That was probably one of my favorite, organized, events that I participated in.
Yeah, Phil, I lived next door to him for a while when I lived in northern Vermont. And yeah, Phil's a character. Before, I guess kind of as I was growing into open water swimming and before he launched Kingdom Games, and it was a long time ago, like 2009. But yeah, Phil's great. He's doing some pretty amazing things up there, despite the community not being as much swimmers as he is for, I don't know, he's so great just about bringing swimmers there. It's awesome. It's really
I don't even know how he got into all of this and how he became this enthusiastic about it, but he's definitely had an impact on our sport.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he told me once, he said that, I can't remember what, he said something like, he's like, I have great endurance for sitting on a boat. so he bridged that into, it's like, these people have great endurance for swimming, I have great endurance for sitting on a boat.
You might have a better plan, you know, sometimes I envy the people on the boat.
Well, like when you were talking about the stars, you know, in St. Lucia, I always think like the people on the boat, they got the best view. Like, I mean, the water, when it's dark or murky, we can't see anything. People on the boat get to watch the stars move over, the sun come up, all that stuff. Storms rolling.
You know, the other interesting thing was I came back on the boat and I had obviously missed the last 30 hours and everybody had bonded and they had little stories about what happened. I'm like, I'm totally out of the loop here.
Yeah, I kind of envy the people on the boat sometimes, but I really like being the swimmer too. How about when conditions get tough, the tide changes, how do you get through some of those tough conditions?
I guess it depends on what you mean by tough. I mean, a lot of the tide things, you know, like what happened here in St. Lucia with the current, like I'm completely unaware of. I think asking for distance while you're out there is probably generally a really bad idea. And I'm kind of prone to doing that. I need to break that habit. For me, one of the toughest things is probably cold, and it might have to do with that experience I had in Ireland. But that's something where I'm mentally just, ever since then, get really aggravated. I did Lake Erie in 2019? Yeah, 19. And it was just a little bit cold here and there in spots, but I immediately start complaining and whining. And so that's difficult for me. Like, cold is hard, but most other things, you know, I'm kind of I do a little bit of meditating on the side. And so I try to relax into it a little bit. So kind of like being accepting of the situation. I feel like if I get more upset about it, and because there's nothing I can do, and the more I fight it and the more I work myself up, then it's really starting to compromise my performance.
Yeah. I'm trying to think how to get more into that. Like when you think about like a newer swimmer, like you know, how would you coach a new aspirant marathon swimmer into, you know, just being that, you know, adaptable, you know, working through those hard spots?
I think a lot of it for me, honestly, because I'm 41 now and I've been in endurance sports in some capacity for a really long time. Yeah. And so some of it is kind of just experience over time. Knowing that those tough spots are passing. And so maybe, you know, just kind of teaching the athlete, you know, you're going to have some rough spots out there. It's pretty normal to have those moments where you're like, I cannot possibly make it to the next feed. And all of a sudden you feel like you're on top of the world again. And it just kind of goes back and forth constantly. So I think, you know, as the athlete gets to know him or herself better while they're out there, I think that really helps them develop that skill. But people always want like a thing that fixes everything quickly. And I always tell, you know, if I work with anybody like coaching wise, I always tell them consistency is probably the one thing that gets you there over time. You know, that's consistency in training, consistency in you know, pursuing different challenges over time. And so some of those skills, they just, as you physically learn how to, you know, deal with the different challenges in the water, it's the same thing, I think, mentally and psychologically.
Yeah, I think there's different, you know, people too are kind of tuned to, or like inclined to endurance sports versus not, you know. So like to some degree, I think it's like a person who's inclined to an endurance sport can kind of, you know, like work into what they need to do. Whereas then some people they're never going to do endurance sports. And that's cool. Has your swimming technique evolved or changed over time?
Not nearly as much as it probably should. So my high school coach when I was 15 was, you know, each practice is like, okay, can you breathe every third stroke? Can we do bilateral breathing? And I still heavily favor the right side. I can't breathe to my left. I just really don't want to. So that kind of makes my stroke a little bit imbalanced. I would say it's probably pretty crude. I mean, when I see pool swimmers on TV, I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know how I stay afloat, but it works for my body. And I think I've become fairly efficient in my stroke technique, but it's open water swimming in some ways is probably pretty different from pool swimming though, because you got to be adaptable and find something that works for your body type that just preserves your energy and keeps you going. But I think there would probably be a lot of room for improvement still, which by now I'm just so stuck in what I've been doing for years and years, it would be hard to make changes.
Yeah. Have you, being a person that favors a certain side for breathing, have you had like shoulder problems or like any other, because I kind of feel like that, like you would get this imbalance in your stroke. Has that caused any problems for you?
Yeah, I've had like problems with my left shoulder on and off over the years, and then got a little bit more serious last year, and I really started worrying about it. So I've been pushing bilateral breathing in practice, but still for racing, I just don't find that same rhythm and flow that I have if I only breathe to my favorite side. What was really encouraging in St Lucia, I'd make some changes to my stroke technique. So that I used to, kind of glide all the way forward and then start pulling. Now I'm starting to kind of work on my high elbow a little bit as I use my back muscles a little bit more and get some of that strain off the shoulder. And to my great surprise, shoulder pain wasn't one of the issues I had in St. Lucia. So that was really exciting.
Yeah,
because I thought that would be a limiting factor, that 20 hours in my shoulders would probably give out with my stroke technique, but that really worked with just adjusting things a little bit, helped a lot.
That's great. Yeah. That's I think it underestimated how much you really have to swim with your back. Like the shoulders. Well, the shoulders are obviously doing the rotation, but it's your back that's the big musculature that we want to lean on. What was the worst part of the pandemic for you?
When the swimming pool closed, that was just it. Also there was a lot of things going on in my private life. Like I was going through a divorce at the same time. I'm like, this is quite possibly the worst combination of things happening in my personal life and in the world. So it's just, like swimming for me is something, even if bad things happen in my life, I have my pool to go to. And somehow, even if it's a really rough day, after an hour of swim practice, I feel a little bit better. Like it kind of stabilizes me and helps me cope. And so having that gone at the same time was a really rough combination for me. And it being too cold outside to swim outside. So I actually bought, this was a failed physics experiment, but I bought one of those inflatable pools at our local Walmart and, just put a bunch of water in my garage. I can tether myself to one of the garage shelves and somehow like swim in place. What I didn't consider was that I couldn't warm that water up quite enough. So it was like sitting at 42 degrees and I tried all kinds of things to get my garage to heat up. That didn't work really well. It just takes a lot of heat to warm up several thousand gallons of water, turns out.
Yeah, that's true.
For desperate times.
Yes. And if you've already said that you don't do cold water, you vote cold water.
No, it wasn't working. So I really had to wait like almost 4 weeks until I could swim at all, even just a little bit.
Wow. Yeah. So that kind of speaks to a hard situation. How do you get through hard situations?
Well, I'd like to say that, I somehow gloriously coped, but there were some days when I was just sitting on my couch and I, probably coped in all the wrong ways and kind of had to reevaluate what I was doing. I had a little bit of a pity party for a few weeks, but, eventually when the pool opened, I kind of got back to my life and work helped a lot, I'm a mental health counselor and we were able to work remotely from home. So the fact that that was still there was really helpful.
Yeah. Being a mom, I'm a mom too. I have my kids are 4 and almost 6. How do you do it? How do you do both? Being mom and be a super marathon swimmer all these years?
You just do it. I guess never really, I guess I never really thought that I couldn't do it because I was a mom. When I started swimming again back in grad school, my son was a couple of years old. He's born 2004, so he was about 5 or 6. And so, I'd find gyms that had the daycare where you can put your son in daycare for 2 hours and then maximize that time in the pool. It was a little bit harder when he was younger. He turned 16 this Monday. So this was the first time in St. Lucia he was on the boat, which was super exciting for me because I always had a bit of guilt. I'd go somewhere and he couldn't come with or he wasn't allowed on the boat. And so this was pretty neat. But yeah, it's usually my training is kind of imperfect, you know, like there's things that come up with school, there's things that come up with work, or so then, you know, you want to do all these, maybe you want to do an 8-hour training swim, but now it's 4 hours because somebody had a birthday party, or so it's you got to be kind of flexible. And sometimes, you know, I get to my swimming events, I'm like, oh, I could have trained so much more, or like all of these things didn't go the way I wanted them to, and then it's just, okay, let's just try anyway.
Yeah. Yep. That's well put. That's, I like how you said that. I never thought I couldn't, because that's been a big part of it for me too. I think it was the year before, well, like when I very first started swimming marathons, it was like I was pregnant a few times, didn't work out, and then but I was swimming marathons while I was pregnant, and it was, yeah, you just like, this is what I'm doing, this is it, this is my thing. Like, I don't know, you can't, it's not, doesn't matter. It's just, there's a lot of marathon swimmers out there that don't have kids. I just I think they're missing out.
You know, I think my son, like, he's kind of watched my swimming, and he must have been maybe 8 or 9 when he said this to me. I was like, Mom, when I'm big, I want to have something like you're swimming, like something that's my thing, because that's so neat that you have that. And, you know, I introduced him to swimming. He didn't like it. He thought the water was too cold. Yeah. He's 6'4". He was introduced to basketball, didn't like that. Anyhow, eventually he got into singing. Now he does show choir, and he's very musically talented and inclined. And so I think he saw that work ethic and having that passion for something, and he's doing that in his own life now with something different. So that was kind of neat to see.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, I can only hope, yeah, my kids could find some passion, really. That's all we need, right? What advice would you give to an aspiring marathon swimmer?
Start slow, you know. I mean, I remember when I went to that first Horsetooth 10K swim, 10K seemed pretty overwhelming. I think my longest swim practice, you know, might have been 5 or 6K, maybe an occasional 8K, but intervals and not in one piece. And so I had a really hard time wrapping my mind even around 10 kilometers. And, you know, then at the pasta party there were some people that had done the English Channel, and I was just really intimidated, and finally worked up the courage to ask Joe if he was really training for the English Channel, and, you know, if I could maybe join that training group. And so it all seemed like completely unattainable. First it was cold water, and then the distances seemed completely crazy. But I think everything kind of happens very gradual, you know, like people don't just show up and swim the English Channel one day. They've probably done a lot of other. So I would say, you know, pick small personal goals and just kind of don't worry about what anybody else is doing, and just go after personal improvement. If you've never swum a mile in one piece, and that's a good first goal to have. And so then kind of working towards that and just focusing on your personal improvement, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, it's good advice for most everything, I think. Start small, work your way up. I want to hear more stories of your swims. I usually that's my second to last question, and my last one is usually, you know, what marathon swimmers have inspired you, but I want to hear more stories about your swimming. What other memories do you have that you could tell us from your big swims?
Oh my goodness, so many. Well, the hardest experience that I had was probably Ireland, you know. So that one kind of stands out in my mind as unfinished business, but I'm not going back.
It's good to know when not to go and when to go.
You know, it was an unusually warm year. It was 59, which is warm for the North Channel. And I had put on 40 pounds, which I think I was eating Cheetos 24/7 and drinking milkshakes. It was awful. You know, and even with all that, it didn't work, but it was kind of a neat experience. It's just such a different ocean from some of the other ones. They have those huge orange line main jellyfish. Really liked Ireland. So that one's kind of special to me, even though it was a failed attempt. I'm trying to think, like Hawaii is special to me. It was special for a long time, even in the 90s when I was trying to qualify for the Arm in Hawaii. I was always like, you got to make it to Big Island. And then coming back in 2013, the swim from Molokai to Oahu was just fantastic. Like at night, this was actually the same in St. Lucia. It must be some type of plankton, but as you're pulling through the water, you see these little gold specks, and it's like, it feels like you're swimming in outer space somewhere, like weightless, and because you can't really quite see where the ocean ends and where the sky begins. And so those are just completely surreal moments. And I always feel like, you know, sunrise, if you're out in the open and there's nothing but water in every single direction, there's just such a relief in having that light back, and you can see the boat again and what people are doing, and it's just really intense. I think we don't really experience something as trivial as a sunrise in that intensity in everyday life. So I had some pretty good moments on the water over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of took my breath away when you said that, thinking about the sunrise on the water, because it is that there is something, and like you said, getting the light back. Like it's so important when you've been swimming in the dark all night long. But that's really cool. You got to experience the bioluminescence in St. Lucia too. That's really cool.
That's what you call that. That's a word for it.
Yeah. I haven't. I've heard, I guess, people in Catalina, I don't know, lots of places, but I need to make it out to the ocean so I can swim in the bioluminescence. Let's see. Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
Oh, I'm a complete introvert, which is interesting. I'm not shy. It doesn't really bother me to talk to people, and I kind of sort of talk to people for a living. But yeah, I'm just completely introverted. I, think about things all the time. And so even when I'm in the water, people are like, what are you thinking about? I'm like, it's everything and anything. I might be wondering about stuff that's going on around me, or I might be, singing a song. I've spent a couple of hours, I think, humming in St. Lucia, which I found really entertaining. So I really have a way of just kind of like being entertained by little things. So it doesn't bother me to not have a lot of stimulation. And that's kind of how I mentally recover a little bit too. So I think my guess is that some of the endurance athletes that are doing the really long distances, they're probably pretty introverted people to be able to deal with some of the sensory deprivation that we're dealing with out there.
Yeah, that's true. Tell us a little bit about your transition to becoming an American, or like to coming to America. I mean, you obviously, like from your accent, you're not American. It's in your book too, but tell us a little bit what that's like and been like.
Overwhelming. I came here in 2003 to Colorado Springs, which I had a lot of ideas about what it was going to be like. One of the big misconceptions about America that I had in my mind was like, you didn't need to have an education. You could just show up and get a big job, and because, there's opportunities everywhere. And then as I'm like, looking for work in the States, and I hadn't gone back to school yet, I pretty quickly realized I probably got to acquire some sort of a skill set to be in a little bit of a better position. So those were just kind of some little learning points. Culturally, there's just odd little things that happen to you. Like in Germany, if somebody asks you how you're doing, then it's not a greeting, it's like an actual question. So then you'd be like, oh my God, I'm terrible. My cat died last Monday, and like everything kind of comes out. And so, it happened to me here a couple of times in the beginning. People would ask me that, and I started talking, and then I realized that's not what they're looking for. So just like, little. What's that?
You're supposed to say fine, whether you are or not. It's on the unfortunate part of our culture. Yeah, I think
there's still some little things. Americans are more outgoing, and thought it was terribly creepy that random people would say hi to you when you'd walk into a pool, and I didn't know these people. It's just not something that we do. I'm like, did I miss something? But so just takes a little bit of adjusting. I've been here 17 years now, but it's interesting because when I go home to Germany now, I kind of don't feel completely German anymore because I'm so used to some of the, things in the States, and I got my life here now. But at the same time, I'm still like, when I talk about Germany, I still say home half of the time, even though I do live here now. So it's kind of confusing a little bit.
Yeah. Have you found any other expatriates to get together with or anything? Like any other?
I'm in rural Indiana, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only German here.
They have online groups, I'm sure.
That would probably be something to look into. Yeah, but I still have a lot of friends at home, from high school and relatives. And so the internet and now having, video calls, all of that kind of over the last 10, 15 years, that's really helped.
Yeah, I guess not having fully thought about moving abroad, but I can see how having that feeling, of, that's not your home now, but this isn't really your home either. But that seems like that expat community maybe if you could find a German expat community that they could be feeling the same way too. I don't know.
So for me, like the sports community and the swimming has almost been that kind of consistent piece that I've done that back home. I've done that here. Like wherever I go, I can usually find a pool, and I can find a few people that are interested in swimming. And so that's been kind of really grounding, having that. I feel like I can go to St. Lucia and I can find some people to swim with and somehow feel like, okay, we got this situated. So that's been super helpful for me over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I'm thinking how like I've always kind of gravitated to rural towns too since living in northern Vermont next to Phil. And but yeah, I don't, but I've always worked online, so I'm ever not ever actually like super involved in the community, but it's the, you know, but that's where I find, yeah, the marathon swimming community is like those are my people, and those who are people I want to be with and travel to be with, and that you connect with really easily, you know, versus the awkward street conversations about the politics about what's going on or whatever. So yeah, interesting, interesting parallel. What do you think? First, let's see, tell us about your next big swim that you're planning first.
You're gonna think I'm crazy. I think I'm crazy, but I still really want to get around that island in St Lucia, and so I have no idea if I'm gonna make it. It seems like a ridiculously large undertaking. I'm obviously not very fast either. I mean, my son noted, if you would just swim twice as fast, would take us half the time. I think. Great advice. But I guess we're just gonna have to wait it out. But so for 77 miles, I'm kind of thinking I might be looking at 50, 60 hours realistically, because I'm just not super fast. And I think just from looking, that seems to be kind of the limit of what people can swim in one piece. So I don't know how well that's going to go. One thing I asked Evan about is like, what happens if I try the circuit navigation and I run out of battery and, 50 miles in, we're done. Does that count as a swim? And he told me that would be a coastal swim then. So I'm like, well, at least we can lock the distance still. But I mean, the plan is to get around the island, but I just don't know what to expect. And I'm not sure how much more I can train, because I pretty much maxed that for this swim. So it's going to look really, really similar. Maybe a couple more, maybe a 24-hour swim here or there for practice, but it'll be interesting. I'm just hooked on the adventure. I really like being out there, not knowing if I'm going to make it or not. I feel like, signing up for another channel that's about 20 miles, I'm like, I kind of know I can do that. And I've done that a bunch. And so let's do something that really scares the daylights out of us and just, go for the adventure. And if it works out, that's great. And if not, I'm going to be a little bit bummed, but I'll probably be able to handle it. But yeah, so that's the plan at least.
I love that. I love your I love your spirit of adventure. That's awesome. And and to sign up for something that you don't know if you'll make it or not. It takes a lot of guts. That's awesome. Do you think
I'm not sure if it's guts or judgment. I go back and forth. I'm like, well,
yeah. We'll see. Yeah. Yep. Do you think you'll stay in rural Indiana?
I am really, really wanting to kind of get towards the coast somewhere. Somewhere warmer, somewhere with an ocean. That's a long-term strategy. My son has 2 years of high school left here, so more than likely we'll probably kind of make it through those 2 years. But Florida has been kind of what I've been having my eye on.
Yeah,
warm water.
Yeah, that's good. Well, tell us what marathon swimmers have inspired you. You've alluded to some, I'm sure, but who else?
Well, there's obviously the gods and goddesses of our universe. I mean, Sarah is just, and I actually know Sarah from back in Colorado, and she was at the same races. Yeah. Long before she did the super crazy things, but she was always exceptionally hard-headed. But what she did there last year, that just, especially after, the press cans and everything she'd been through, it just blew my mind. It was just unbelievable. I think we're all just floored. Mm-hmm. When I heard her say that she's going to try to do a 4 times English channel, I'm like, I'm not sure if that's possible. Like 3, you can probably do. I don't know if any human can do 4. And then it just kind of happened. It was just crazy to watch. I still get like all excited just thinking about it. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And then her 104 miles was equally amazing. Cameron Bellamy is like another one where just to be in that ocean for close to 60 hours, like, oh my goodness. So those are probably some people that I find really inspiring. Jamie, of course, just swims around New York 4 times real quick after the pandemic, like it's no big deal. Sometimes I'm just really amazed what, I go on social media and I see that somebody's done something that's just completely mind-blowing, like it's no big deal. There's definitely a lot of inspiring people in the community.
Yeah, for sure. Very good. I don't have any more questions. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
You're very welcome.